Hi, my name is Dr. RKS Mangesdas, and today I'm going to talk to you about something which is very interesting, which are called as the three principles and four pillars of neurolinguistic programming. And I have named this as tabletop model. I will explain you why it is. And for the first thing, let me tell you, in NLP generally we do not say anything is a rigid principle. Rather, some aspects we have taken it as the principle of NLP. So that's why we say there are three principles and four pillars. Generally, what we do. NLP is known as 80% setup and 20% shut-on. That means if I am running a process, I am running a therapy, I am running a counseling session, anything which is based on NLP or maybe a coaching, most of the time I spend on setting up the process, that means creating the background, which is so solid that the process of NLP it really works big time. And it looks like a tabletop model because the process happens at the tabletop, which is being supported by four pillars and a background with three principles. So therefore, when you look at this model, you can understand. So when a client comes to us and tells that, I'm not successful, my life is not working, whatever I decided, I could not get it. We understand this is like a person is complaining. There, the three principles, first we work on the three principles. One of the principles says that perception is projection. That's one of the principles of neuro-linguistic programming. It says that perception is projection. That means whatever the person is projecting is actually coming from within, so which is a perception within. So if a person is complaining about something like, I cannot do it, so the perception is that the person is lacking on certain resources. So therefore, if that resources can be identified what the person is lacking and we can work on it, then the person will become successful. That's why when the person complains, we make the person realize what is it that person needs to become successful. So then another principle which is called as cause and effect. As you know, when a person is complaining, the person remains on the effect side. He says that person did something for which I could not become successful. So the person remains on the effect side. So when somebody is on the effect side, the person cannot bring in the adequate changes which is required for the person to work on himself or herself. That's why what we do, we make the person, by communication, we make the person to come to the cause side. Because if the person believes I am the cause of my life, then the person can bring in the adequate changes. Therefore, by communicating, we bring the person to the cause side. And then another principle of NLP is called as responsibility for values. Any of the development process, suppose I am a coach and I have a coachee who is taking this coaching session from me, or somebody who wants to be developed. Both of us, we set up a responsibility. If I stick to my responsibility and the client sticks to his or her responsibility, then the changes will happen. That is why when somebody comes and talks about the development process and the life-changing aspect, what do? We make the person first to realize that the perception is projection to connect to the resources. We bring the person from the effect side to the cause side. We ask the person, or we make the person volunteer to take responsibility for the values the person really wants to seek in. And then what is most important is also the four pillars. It's not a sequence, everything happens like together. So the four pillars are rapport. If you do not have rapport with a client, because one of the presupposition of neurolinguistic programming says that resistance in a client is lack of rapport. That is why throughout the process, we maintain a rapport with the client. If somewhere we find the rapport is broken, rather than talking about the process or doing the process, we come back and we rework on the rapport. That is why rapport is a pillar. If it is little tilted, the process may not do properly. Another pillar is called as outcome. That means what we want the person throughout the process of NLP, the person goes closer and closer and closest, and then to be on the outcome. If a process is not taking to a person towards the outcome, then it is not the right process. That is why it is a pillar. And another pillar is called as sensory acuity. The meaning of the word sensory acuity is our observation skills. As much as we observe a client, we can know when the client is synchronized, when the client is not synchronized, when the client is observing the information, when the client is not observing the information. So all these things can be calibrated just by observing the client. That is why another skill, or we call it the pillar of neuro-linguistic programming, is called as sensory acuity. And one more interesting pillar of neuro-linguistic programming is called as flexibility. We always say, if whatever you are doing is not working, do something else. That's what Einstein also mentioned, Otherwise we say another plan B, sometimes we talk about. So it's like that. If a person is decided about an outcome, we say the person, while he is going towards the outcome, he is following a path. If a particular path is stuck up, the person can actually take another path so that the person can reach at the results. Sometimes when everything was going good, suddenly pandemic happened. And people who were flexible, who could create another path, they became successful. So you must be knowing, many organizations during pandemic also could establish their business, but many, they just collapsed, because flexibility is the key of the life. That's why the three principles are called as perception is projection, cause and effect, and responsibility for values. And the four pillars are called as outcome, flexibility, rapport, and sensory acuity. To remember this, I can give you a formula which is called as CRP, force. C for cause and effect, R for responsibility for values, P for perception is projection, and then force, F for flexibility, O for outcome, R for rapport, and S for sensory acuity. And once these three principles, which was like a background or which was like a ground, and the four pillars, which works like a support, is established, then as a tabletop, we come and establish on that. We are stable and we run the NLP process. That's why I have named it as the tabletop model of NLP. So learn it and enjoy. All the best.